Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is
Murder Coaster.
step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and behold, more 1980s satanic panic. This time, a wannabe sorcerer of the black arts who found Wild West justice in the Rocky Mountains of Montana, as we bring you the tale of bumbling occultist and serial killer Wayne Nance the Missoula Mauler.
Let's begin. Prologue. Doug Wells and the Savage. Doug Wells was a gunsmith who enjoyed renovating antique firearms, and on September 4th, 1986, he and his wife, Chris, had spent the day firing his Savage lever-action Model 99G, a rifle that had been manufactured in 1919, testing it out after repairs he'd made.
They were driving to their home on 100 Parker Court in Missoula, Montana, when Doug noticed a strange vehicle parked beside his house, an orange and white Ford pickup, and the truck was parked half in the street and half in their yard.
Though irked that the truck was partially on his lawn, at first Doug thought nothing of it and went inside. But thinking about the fishing boat he kept on a trailer beneath the deck and how easy it would be to back up to it and drive away with it, he decided to investigate. But the truck was already gone.
It was nearly midnight now, and Chris retired to the bedroom while Doug took his Savage rifle down to the basement and began to clean it, using a ramrod to run a solvent-soaked patch through the barrel.
After cleaning the Savage, he left the rifle on his workbench and went back upstairs, headed for bed, when he remembered it was trash night. So he grabbed his trash cans and began to drag them to the curb, when he noticed a figure crouched down between an ornamental evergreen and the side of the house.
"Who's there?" Doug shouted.
From out of the bushes emerged a bearded, red-headed man who said, "It's Wayne from Conlin's."
Collins was a furniture store where Doug's wife Chris worked, and Doug recognized the guy. A weird, kind of creepy fellow who was infatuated with Chris, always giving her strange trinkets and drawings.
Doug barked at Wayne.
"Well, what the hell are you doing here?"
I saw something. A prowler. You better get a flashlight."
Thinking of the mysterious orange and white truck, Doug assumed Wayne had just been driving by and saw something suspicious and had stopped to investigate. "Okay," Doug said. "I have a flashlight inside. I'll go grab it."
As Doug stepped into his house to retrieve a flashlight, Wayne snuck up behind him and struck him over the head with a wooden billy club, knocking him face first to the ground.
Doug was stunned. The back of his head was opened up, blood pouring out, but he quickly gained his composure, rolled onto his back, and managed to kick the red-headed man as he went to strike him again, knocking Wayne into the wall.
Doug then grabbed the man, pulling him to the ground, and the two began to wrestle ferociously.
In the bedroom, Chris heard the commotion and ran out in her nightgown just as Wayne pulled a Ruger pistol from a holster and hollered,
"Get back! I've got a gun!"
Chris gazed at her weird coworker, screaming,
"Wayne, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this?"
And Wayne coolly answered her,
"I did something really bad. I gotta get out of town. I know you got paid today, so I'm gonna need some money and then get out of town.
Wayne then produced a plastic bread bag from out of his plaid flannel shirt and pulled a section of rope from it, tossed it to Chris, and commanded her to tie Doug up.
When Chris was done tying her husband's hands behind his back, Wayne then tied her hands together, saying, "Once I get out of town, I'll call somebody and they'll come untie you. You'll be free and I'll be gone. But I have to separate you or you'll untie each other too fast."
Wayne then scooped Chris up in his arms, carried her to the bedroom, and lay her in her bed, binding her hands to the bed frame and using a pair of pantyhose and a sock as a gag.
Wayne then quickly scurried back to Doug, gagging him as well, before pulling him to his feet and leading him to the basement, saying, "I'm gonna tie you up down there so that you'll be away from Chris."
Wayne led Doug down into the unfinished basement, into his workshop, and lashed him to a wooden pillar. Then, Wayne began to savagely beat Doug in the head with the billy club.
Doug sunk down, fighting to keep aware, keep consciousness, as Wayne then disappeared back up the steps.
Doug looked about in a daze, his eyes falling on the 1919 Savage rifle that lay on his workbench, hoping that Chris would remember that he kept a loaded AMT-22 semi-automatic pistol in his nightstand drawer.
As Chris worked at the knots binding her wrists together with her fingernails, Wayne came bursting into the room. He checked her knots, confirmed she was still secure, then again went to the basement.
In the basement, Wayne checked Doug's restraints, then paced before him, talking to himself.
"You gotta be smart. You gotta be smart. You're smarter than they are. You're gonna pull this off. You gotta think. Now think, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna get out of this?"
Then Wayne knelt down beside Doug, slid his 8-inch oak-handled hunting knife from its sheath, and stabbed Doug in the chest, sinking the knife in to the hilt.
The knife blade nicked Doug's lung, missed his heart by millimeters, and punctured his diaphragm, releasing a raspy whoosh of air.
Doug looked up into Wayne's face, expecting a look of victory or glee or malice or anger, something, anything. Only his face was blank, his eyes cold and dead, like the black eyes of a lifeless doll.
Wayne then pulled the knife free, 8 inches of carbon blade, which he then wiped on Doug's pants to clean the blood off.
This callous action, cleaning the knife blade he'd used to stab him with on his pants, filled Doug with an incredible rage as Wayne then nonchalantly strolled away back up the steps.
Infuriated and thinking he was going to die, Doug wanted one act of revenge before he left this earth, and shot up like a jack-in-the-box, now determined to get the Savage rifle. He may die, but he was going to take that asshole with him.
His adrenaline now pumping overtime, Doug worked the knots binding his hands and managed to get himself free, struggled over to his workbench, loaded a single shot into the Savage lever-action Model 99G, and positioned himself at the bottom of the stairs in a sniper's squat, aligning the sight up to the door, then made 3 loud banging sounds on the wall with his elbow, and waited for his prey.
Sure as shit, Wayne Nance came to investigate the sound, and when he opened the basement door, Doug fired.
But just as he was squeezing the trigger, Doug saw Wayne begin to dart aside with a look of shock on his face.
At first, Doug thought he'd missed him, as Wayne was gone from the doorway, but he'd actually hit him in the side, the powerful shot going right through him, the bullet slamming through the wall and out into the night.
Then Doug heard Wayne cry out,
"Oh God, I'm a dead man."
Doug clambered up the steps and out of the basement, finding Wayne on his hands and knees trying to crawl away. Taking the savage rifle by the barrel, Doug began to use it as a club, slamming the stock into Wayne's head again and again as Wayne crept forward now, slinking into the bedroom, Wayne crying,
"Doug, stop. Don't do this, please. Stop."
Chris, who'd managed to free one of her hands, her other still tied to the bed frame, thrust herself forward to get at Wayne and began beating him with her free hand, screaming,
"You son of a bitch! You son of a bitch!"
As Wayne was being pummeled, he managed to get his hands down onto his own pistol, roll over, and fire a round at Doug.
Doug, seeing the flash of gunmetal, instinctively ducked, and the bullet went zinging over his head and into the ceiling, just missing him. But Wayne fired again, this time hitting Doug above the knee, the bullet tearing through his leg.
Howling in pain, Doug swung the rifle at Wayne again, this time hitting the lamp, knocking it to the ground and plunging the room into darkness, just as Wayne fired the gun again, the flash of the muzzle piercing the blackness.
Doug dove across the bed to his nightstand, where he kept his loaded pistol.
Grasping the pistol, Doug flicked on the overhead light to see Wayne wheezing and quivering, a bullet wound to his head.
It appears that in the darkness, Doug had hit Wayne's hand just as he was firing his gun, and it had gone off as it swung back, causing him to shoot himself in the head.
So crazy.
Doug took Wayne's gun, removed the cartridge from the chamber, tossed it onto the bed, and told his wife,
"Call 911. I don't know how long I've got left."
Authorities arrived, ambulances, police, and Doug was rushed to the hospital.
Wayne, who was still twitching, was loaded onto a gurney and carried out. But one of the paramedics lost their footing, tripped, and caused Wayne to be dumped from the stretcher.
Oh God, what are the odds? One of the police officers looked at him, covered in bruises and abrasions, shot in the side, a bullet in his head, and asked, "Oh, hey, are you okay?"
And another cop said,
"Just leave him there for a while."
Lying in the hospital, thinking he was surely dying, Doug watched as Wayne was eventually carted in. One of the nurses saying,
"His vitals aren't bad. His respiration is there. His pulse is quick but strong."
and another nurse saying,
"He's okay. He's going to make it."
and Doug thought to himself, I didn't even kill the son of a bitch, before Chris came in to tell him that Wayne was in fact dead. And the nurses were talking about him, saying he was going to be all right. It was him that was going to make it.
In the end, the coroner would conclude it was the original shot from the Savage rifle that killed Wayne Nance. It had severed the renal artery, and he was bleeding out all the while when the chaos was unfolding.
Investigators would quickly realize that this Wayne Nance had been the main suspect of a shockingly brutal murder and rape 12 years earlier, when he'd only been 18 years old and still in high school.
They would then link him to 6 more murders and realize Wayne Nance was in fact a serial killer who'd been operating right under their noses for over a decade. Wayne Nance was the dreaded Missoula Mauler.
Chapter 1: The Strange Little Red-Headed Boy.
Wayne Nathan Nance was born on October 18, 1955, in Clinton, Montana, the second child of George Edwin Nance, a long-haul truck driver who was 27 years old, and Charlene Mae Mackey, who was 18 and worked as a waitress.
George and Charlene had married when Charlene was only 16 and already pregnant with their first child, Wayne's older sister, Desiree.
Wayne was a happy, chunky baby with bright pumpkin orange hair and lots of freckles.
After Wayne, the family had another son named William, and finally another little girl named Vetta.
They lived there in Clinton on the south side of Missoula, but as the family grew larger and larger, they needed more and more space, so they moved to a double-wide trailer in the Elmar Trailer Park, lot number 8 on Tina Avenue, park's main thoroughfare.
Wayne was a rambunctious and precocious little fellow who loved playing cowboy and Indians with the other kids in the trailer park. But by just 8 years old, the redhead had established himself as a bully with a vicious and cruel streak.
When a little girl on the school bus dropped her glasses, Wayne picked them up, making as if to give them back, then grinned and snapped them in half.
And this little girl's parents owned the trailer park and were none too pleased, her father confronting Wayne's parents. But Wayne's father, George, just said, "Boys will be boys," and blew the whole thing off.
But the trailer park owners would see other disturbing traits in little Wayne. There was an incinerator there in the trailer park where residents burned their trash, and on cold winter days, kittens would gather on the edge of it to keep warm.
One day, Wayne was strolling by, not knowing he was being watched, when he tipped the litter of kittens right into the flames, instantly incinerating the innocent little creatures.
Ugh. And Wayne would brag to his classmates that he loved killing cats, claiming he would tie them up and skin them alive.
The family then moved to another trailer park called Tamarack Court in Pine Grove, the owners of the Elmar Park happy to see weird little Wayne go away.
Things weren't easy for the family. George was often gone, hauling freight across the country, and Charlene, resentful of her lost youth, having married George when she got pregnant at 16, would drink to find solace from her despair. And little Wayne was just constantly getting into trouble.
Yet, despite his cruel and sadistic streak and his constant troublemaking, Wayne was very bright and an excellent student. His teachers all remarked how gifted and talented he was. He loved to read and familiarize himself with a variety of subjects, including human sexuality, which his friends say he became an expert in from a very young age.
He loved snakes and would capture them, write reports on them, and bring them into show and tell, seeming to delight in how they made other students uncomfortable.
Wayne had a friend in the trailer park named Kenny Pounds, who was a year older than him. His family lived right next door. They were extremely religious, but Kenny and Wayne would be up to mischief. Kenny's dad had a Luger pistol, and sometimes they'd shoot it.
Later, Kenny's family would move to a house a mile and a half away, and Wayne would walk the back road there. Kenny showed him where his father kept his gun in a hidden inner drawer you'd have to know about to find. More on that later.
And Wayne loved to fight. He was a natural-born scrapper. If someone just gave him a sidelong glance, he'd stroll up and sock them. He fought so much he got himself kicked off the school bus. And when the principal called the house to inform George his son was not allowed back on the bus, George basically challenged the principal to a fight himself. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree when it comes to these two.
The whole incident just served to make Wayne more of an obnoxious troublemaker. Wayne telling a friend, "My dad told me you gotta get them before they get you. That's my motto."
Chapter 2. Father Knows Best.
On December 14th, 1968, Wayne's father, George, entered the Super Save store in Missoula just as the assistant manager, Howard Bryan, was bagging up the day's money, getting it ready for the armored car driver who would soon be arriving.
George brandished a pistol, informed him it was a robbery, and told him to hand over all the money, which he did, forking it over without a fight.
If George was smart, he would have then fled the store with the loot. But he wasn't smart. Instead, with the same cruel streak and sadism that his son had inherited, George tied him up, dragged him to the back of the store, and began to pistol whip him in the head.
And then, as he was exiting the store, in a moment of pure idiotic vandalism, George took a large salt block and hurled it through the front window, smashing out the glass storefront. At the exact moment that the armored car driver was pulling up.
The armored car driver, seeing the front window of the store explode, radioed the police, who quickly arrived in force and laid siege to the little store.
There were city police, sheriffs, highway patrol, even the fire department, all surrounding the store, ready for a Wild West firefight. But George just curled up in a corner where he was eventually discovered by police dogs and arrested without a fight.
George was sentenced to 5 years in the Montana State Prison. Wayne was 13 years old and in the 7th grade.
George would only serve a year of this sentence, but the incident must have had an effect on young Wayne. Even from a social perspective, he was the son of a violent armed thief. It had to have carried some stigma, and you think maybe helped shape his young mind.
Chapter 3, Class of 1974.
Sentinel High School was a place overburdened by the baby boom. In 1974, the Sentinel High student body was the largest single population of teenagers in all of Missoula County, Montana. There were simply too many kids. The high school was built to accommodate 1,000 students, 1,100 at the most, but there were over 2,000 students, and the school administrators, they just couldn't control them. The students just came and went as they pleased.
Wayne Nance stood out from the other kids in Wild Sentinel High. There was his bright orange hair, as well as his love of doo-wop songs. He'd walk down the halls singing Blue Moon in a deep baritone. He was also a very gifted artist, his art teacher encouraging him to try to get a college scholarship or grant.
But Wayne never took art seriously. He only drew violent scenes of sword and fantasy, bloody battle axes, ugly, deformed monsters, twisted demons arising from the fires of hell.
He had memorized Lewis Carroll's poem, The Jabberwocky, and would joyously spout it out at whoever would listen. "'Twas brillick and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wab. All mimsy were the borogoves and the mome raths out grob. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jubbub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the Mannix foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood awhile in thought. And as in offish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the Tolgi wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frab joyous day, Callooh, Calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillick and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. all mimsy wore the borogoves, and the mome raths out garabe.
Very nice, very nice. While still receiving excellent grades, all of his teachers remarking how brilliant the troubled kid was, Wayne was still picking fights and brawling nearly every single day.
At one point, he brought a hypodermic syringe to school and stabbed random students with it.
Yeah, man, it was that 70s culture where violence and bullying were just seen as the way things were. A rite of passage all kids had to go through. Wayne was also fascinated with black magic and devil worship. Cue the scary satanic panic music. He read The Exorcist, got a Ouija board, and experimented with tarot cards.
Wayne also became obsessed with Vikings, claiming he worshipped Odin, and set some floats from the homecoming celebration on fire in order to have a burial at sea. Just 70s kids being 70s kids, committing arson and stabbing randoms with a syringe.
Wayne told his friends that he'd been visited by a queen of the dark side in a dream, and she'd led him to a star-shaped, gold-colored medallion he wore around his neck. He claimed he'd been ordained as a third-degree witch, that he was in a coven and working to be a warlock. And he began claiming his real birthday was Halloween and not October 18th.
Then Wayne began telling his friends that in order to fulfill his destiny, he had to commit his first murder before his 19th birthday.
Chapter 4. Donna Lorraine Pounds.
This time I need to wait it out. Hold on tight, there's a storm standing in the eye. When it rains, it pours, and you sure know how to make me cry. Thank God for the moon and how she lights up the sky too.
Harvey Pounds, whose family had once lived next door to Wayne in the trailer park, but had since moved to a nice suburban home a mile and a half away, was a shoe salesman, and a damn good one at that. He was also a fundamentalist, fire and brimstone preacher, a deacon at Bethel Baptist Church, as well as a DJ on the local Christian radio station.
Harvey's wife, Donna, worked at a Christian bookstore and volunteered at St. Patrick's Hospital.
They were good Christian people, though Harvey's constant preaching and holier-than-thou attitude rubbed a few people, including his own brothers, the wrong way. He just wouldn't stop with the constant sermonizing.
It was the dawn of the satanic panic, and Harvey and Donna both preached of the evil ways of the occult. Harvey preached that even astrology was the devil's work, and proselytized on his radio show, saying, "Was Satan marshaling his forces for the inevitable confrontation?"
And at the bookstore where Donna worked, they sold books linking the rise in the occult and interest in Satanism to apocalyptic prophecies in the Book of Revelation. Spooky times.
At their church, they showed educational films like Satan on the Loose, which portrayed devil worshippers dancing in hypnotic trances.
The church also campaigned against the local Sentinel High School from even discussing occult practices.
They had 3 children, Kathy the youngest, who was 12, Kenny, who, as we said, had once been friends with Wayne, and he had graduated high school the year earlier and already joined the army. And then there was their oldest, Karen, who was 20.
It was Maundy Thursday, the day before Good Friday, April 11th, 1974, and Harvey and Donna had just celebrated their 22-year wedding anniversary when Donna Lorraine Pounds returned home after visiting a friend. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. She had no idea there was an intruder in her house waiting for her in her bedroom.
The intruder, who was wearing amber-colored latex gloves, used her husband Harvey's own gun, .22 caliber Luger, to subdue her. A gun that was kept in a hidden drawer built into the cabinet.
To show her he was serious, the intruder fired a warning shot.
He then bound her to the bed with short sections of clothesline he produced from a black bag, tying her spread eagle to the bedpost. Using a knife he kept in a sheath on his side, he cut off her slacks and undergarments, removed her sanitary napkin and tossed it onto the bedroom floor, and proceeded to viciously sexually assault her.
Afterwards, he led her at gunpoint down into the unfinished basement, forcing her to kneel on her hands and knees under the stairwell.
He then shot her 5 times in the back of the head, point blank. After she fell forward dead, he shoved the gun between her legs, inserting it within her, and left, turning the basement light off on his way out.
When Harvey returned home that evening, his 12-year-old daughter Kathy was there, watching television with a friend, and she asked nonchalantly why there were ropes tied to the corners of all the beds, as well as around the base of the toilet.
Oh man, this shit is so terrifying. This little girl is just sitting there watching television with her friend, and she has no idea what has happened in her house. And her friend could easily have walked in while that guy was in there. Just gives you goosebumps to think about.
Yeah, it's horrific. Harvey starts looking around, and yes, every bed in the house had ropes tied to the corners. And in his own bedroom, he saw, to his horror, Donna's bra and panties lying on the floor, sliced up beside a bloody sanitary napkin, and the holster to his hidden Luger lying there empty as well.
Wisely, Harvey then sent his daughter to her friend's house, then began searching the home, eventually going down into the basement and coming upon his wife's body, naked, crammed into the space beneath the stairs, with his own gun inserted inside her.
Of course, Harvey, being the husband, was the main suspect at first, and his alibi was quite weak.
Harvey said he was eating lunch alone at the clothing store where he sold shoes, and the murder happened, giving him ample time to have committed the crime, and none of the other employees had seen him during this lunch break.
He agreed to take a lie detector test. It came back inconclusive, but he wasn't being evasive in the least. Quite the opposite, opening his life and home for investigation, even going overboard and calling police constantly anytime he came up with a seemingly new clue or theory.
But another suspect emerged as well. A neighbor said she was sure she had seen a neighborhood kid that had been friends with Donna's son Kenny in the backyard that day, carrying a black duffel bag. And another neighbor said they too saw the kid, a red-headed high school senior from the neighboring trailer park named Wayne Nance.
After searching the area, police found an amber-colored latex glove on a dirt service road that connected the neighborhood with the Tamarack Trailer Park where Wayne lived just a mile and a half away.
And as we said, Harvey's family knew Wayne and his family very well. They'd been their neighbors when the Pounds lived in the trailer park. Wayne had visited Kenny at his new home several times and even used the family Luger for target practice with Kenny, and he knew exactly where Harvey kept it hidden.
Chapter 5. The Pentagram.
It's been done, Wayne Nance told his classmate Bill Cannigan as he stared stonily out the window in the stairway, perched on the ledge, as if sitting upon a throne, eyes distant, as if in a trance.
What's been done? Bill asked.
It's been done, Wayne said, not taking his eyes from the distant horizon.
What are you talking about?
Wayne then turned and lifted his shirt sleeve to reveal a large infected brand on his arm, leaking pus, a downward-facing, 5-pointed star, the infamous inverted pentagram.
Wayne then looked Bill in the eyes, snarled, and began to laugh dementedly, so loudly the sounds echoed in the concrete stairway.
Bill was suddenly gripped with terror. Bill knew Wayne well. They worked together at Taco John's, and Bill was used to hearing his bullshit about wanting to become a warlock and wearing magical pendants, all of Wayne's talk of wanting to join a murderous coven of magicians of the black arts, and now this bizarre branding correlated in his mind. How Wayne always said he had to commit his first murder before he turned 19. Now Bill was suddenly sure of it. Wayne Nance had murdered Donna Pounds. Terrified and nauseated, Bill turned and ran away as Wayne sat on the ledge, his echoing laughter filling the concrete stairway.
Later, Wayne would show the brand off to a girl named Kim Brigman, whom he'd known since grade school, and tell her he'd taken a coat hanger, bent it into the shape of a pentagram, gotten it red hot, and branded himself.
Kim says she was shocked, but not that shocked. She'd known Wayne all her life, had ridden the school bus with him every day for 9 years, and he did all kinds of weird things. He wore an imitation shrunken head looped around his neck, a skull with withered flesh clinging to the bone. Carried a knife on him everywhere he went, even though it was against school rules. He'd fight anyone, everyone, anytime, anywhere. He was a freak who didn't give a shit what other people thought.
Meanwhile, detectives investigating Wayne discover he had absolutely no alibi for the day of the murder, that he had skipped school that day and claims to have spent it in bed at his parents' trailer.
Detectives narrow in on the red-headed teenager and procure a search warrant for his parents' trailer. In Wayne's room, which was piled with old magazines like a hoarder and filled with all kinds of knives, they found a black gym bag, just like the one described by the neighbor. Inside, they found .22 caliber bullets and shell casings, the same brand as the one used in the murder.
They also found a pair of Wayne's underwear with what appeared to be a large blood stain on them, but they had been washed by his mother.
Then detectives formally requested an interview with Wayne.
Wayne then went around school bragging that he'd been interviewed and was the #1 suspect in the horrible murder that had rocked the little community.
Wayne then went to a lawyer named Ronald McDonald, a very American name, and basically asked how to pass a lie detector test. The lawyer was initially amused by the boisterous red-headed high school student, The teen seemed so nonplussed and unconcerned about being a suspect in a brutal murder that Ronald McDonald didn't think there was a chance in hell that Wayne was guilty. He was just a kid, after all.
Wayne was very forthright. He told Ronald McDonald that he was into black magic, and even brought the lawyer some books on the subject. Then Wayne showed him his pentagram brand, and the lawyer began to see him a little differently, thinking the surly kid in the army fatigue jacket and flannel shirt was more than just a little rebel. He seemed deadly hardcore.
Wayne was beginning to freak Ronald McDonald the hell out. It was a big case, could bring a lot of attention, but in the end, Ronald McDonald decided he didn't want this strange kid as a client and gave Wayne one last piece of advice, saying,
"The circumstances are very serious. You shouldn't do anything without an attorney."
Now get this is insane. That night, police found Wayne Nance under a bridge, completely naked, masturbating in front of a homemade altar where he'd sacrificed several cats. Red flag.
Now Wayne began to threaten Bill Cannigan, whom he rightly suspected was spreading rumors that Wayne had killed Donna Pounds.
Wayne basically tells Bill that, yeah, he'd killed her, and now he was going to kill Bill as well. Terrified, Bill went to the principal of Sentinel High School, who reported it all to the police.
Wayne was then taken and given a polygraph, or lie detector test, and Wayne passed it. No problem.
For those who don't know, it's often easy for a psychopath or sociopath to pass a polygraph test, as they've been lying their entire lives. Basically, their entire life is built on creating the illusion of a normal person.
You may remember Pee Wee Gaskins famously said he could pass any lie detector test by simply concentrating on wiggling his little toe.
Gary Ridgway was an early suspect in the Green River Killer murders, but passed his lie detector test and was therefore seen as innocent and ignored by investigators when he was in fact the killer. And meanwhile, perfectly innocent people will fail these tests because they're understandably nervous. Listeners know how much I love the podcast This American Life, and they have an amazing episode on lie detectors. And if you're interested in all this, I will put a link to it in the show notes.
Wayne passing the lie detector test wasn't the only obstacle investigators faced. During the investigation of the crime scene, a single pubic hair had been found. But before it could be compared to Wayne's, it was somehow lost.
And investigators never could discover where exactly the ropes that were used to bind Donna had come from. Though they combed every hardware store in the area, they couldn't find any ropes that matched the unique braiding pattern and inner core.
No fingerprints could be found on the rubber gloves that were found on the trail leading from the Pounds' home to Wayne's trailer park. And the blood found on Wayne's underwear was found to be human, but because they had been washed, there was nothing more that could be ascertained.
Meanwhile, the sheriff never stopped considering the husband to be the killer, and considerable effort was still being put into investigating Harvey, who also had no alibi and whose polygraph test had come out inconclusive.
The trail went cold, and on June 19, 1974, Wayne Nance graduated from high school and promptly joined the Navy.
Chapter 6: Duty and Patriotism. After basic training, Wayne was stationed to the USS Robeson and maintained a spotless Navy record for a year.
He was then sent to Nuclear Prototype School in Idaho Falls, Idaho, on November 5th, 1975, but was expelled from the school for, quote, demonstrated unreliability, end quote, and sent back to the USS Robeson.
On September 13th, 1977, he was caught with marijuana, the devil's lettuce. He was fined and put on probation for 14 days. And if he had stayed out of trouble, the incident would have been expunged from his record and would have just gone away. But just 2 days before the 14-day probation period was up, he was caught with more weed, as well as LSD, 2 illegal butterfly knives, and a pair of stolen binoculars.
Wayne was now in big trouble and was promptly kicked out of the Navy.
He was given a general or less than honorable discharge by reason of misconduct. And before leaving the ship, he managed to steal a telescope and pack it in his bag.
Before heading home to Montana, Wayne visited Seattle, Washington, where it's believed he ran into 15-year-old runaway Devonna Nelson, murdered her, then headed back to Montana, where he dumped her body off Interstate 90.
He then moved right back into his parents' trailer, telling them he'd just grown tired of being in the Navy and that it had been an honorable discharge.
It had been 3 years and he was right back where he'd started.
Wayne's father, George, was still working as a long-haul truck driver, and his mother, Charlene, was working as a bartender at a local bar called The Cabin, and as a waitress at Tabor's truck stop.
George and Charlene were constantly fighting, rumors still circulating that Wayne was a murderer, and one night, after a fierce and very public argument with her husband, Charlene drove straight into a giant ponderosa pine as fast as she could, never braking or trying to turn away, hitting the massive tree head-on. The car was ripped in two, and she died instantly.
She was buried in the Missoula City Cemetery, only 5 blocks away from the church where she'd gotten married at 16.
Just a month later, George's father, Wayne's grandfather, died, leaving his son his ranch house on Minnesota Avenue in Missoula, right next door to the Cabin bar. So George, Wayne, and Wayne's brothers and sisters all moved in.
In many ways, it was a new start for the troubled family. Wayne got a job as a bouncer at the Cabin and started taking classes at the University of Montana.
In his first semester, Wayne received an A in art, but received an F in a course entitled, quote, Introduction to Women.
Yeah, it sounds about right. But he maintained a high grade point average. He was very intelligent, taking some of the toughest classes the university had to offer, including a 5-credit biology class he received an A in. But then, he simply gave up. The last semester he took, he was enrolled in German, Spanish, and physics. Quite the course load, but just stopped going to classes, received Fs in each of them, and never returned to college again.
In January of 1980, the crew of a slow-moving freight train saw what appeared to be skeletal remains resting on a chain-link fence where trash and litter collected.
The body was ascertained to be that of a female. She had no shoes or underwear, and the remains showed she'd been stabbed in the chest. Not knowing her true identity, investigators simply called her Betty Beavertail, as she'd been found near the Beavertail Hill State Park.
She wouldn't be identified until 5 years later as Devonna Wilson, an underage runaway from Seattle, Washington. But how she came to end up 500 miles away from her hometown was unknown. It wouldn't be until after Wayne's death that investigators realized she went missing at the same time Wayne was swinging through Seattle after being kicked out of the Navy.
Chapter 7. The Cabin.
Working as a bouncer at the cabin bar, a change came over Wayne. He stopped being so outwardly obnoxious. He became aware of his mean streak and cruelty, confiding in the other bouncer about his anger issues. He made a true effort to be kinder, nicer.
In fact, Wayne became the quintessential nice guy. He remembered folks' birthdays, their wedding anniversaries, would give them little trinkets or drawings he had made, and he was always there to lend a hand to those who needed it.
The question is, was Wayne Nance trying to become a better person, or was he learning to mask his psychopathy, to create the illusion of a fellow human being, when in truth there was just a soulless monster there? For he was also becoming more secretive and stranger. He refused to let anyone enter the bedroom he kept in his father's home.
He also started getting tattoos, snakes and spiders, a bloody scythe, a serpentine dragon breathing fire across his shoulders.
That summer, a woman named Denise Tate returned from work to her trailer in Missoula to find someone had come in and tied ropes to the corners of her bedposts while she was out. She threw the ropes away, but reported the incident to the sheriff the next day, thinking it was some stupid prank.
The sheriff did not think it was a prank. He knew that this is exactly what had happened with the Donna Pound murder. And he remembered that Wayne Nance returned home from the Navy.
In February of 1982, Wayne started working at Conlon's furniture store. At first, it was just part-time work in the warehouse, but by September, he'd become a full-time employee, working the warehouse and making deliveries.
Wayne bestowed everyone at Conlon's furniture with his newfound charm, memorizing all their birthdays, giving little gifts and making weird little drawings for his fellow employees, especially his boss, Chris Wells, a short, blonde woman with a pixie haircut, married to a gunsmith named Doug.
Everyone knew Wayne had a thing for Chris, a bizarre crush that he really didn't try to hide, telling folks he had a thing for petite blonde women, showering her with little drawings and keepsakes that she'd simply throw away.
Wayne gave her the creeps. He gave a lot of people the creeps. He just seemed too nice, buying cheap trinkets at the Hallmark store in the mall to give out on holidays, showing up with green ice cream on St. Patrick's Day, bringing in homemade cookies. He was too eager, and there was always some vulgar double entendre to his gifts. Once giving Chris a drawing of her in a wine glass with her legs provocatively up in the air.
And Wayne didn't hide his disdain for Chris's husband, Doug, saying he didn't deserve her, sometimes being openly hostile to the gunsmith when he'd swing by the furniture store to see his wife.
But Wayne was a hard worker, often making a show of taking no lunch break, and he had a reputation for being no nonsense. During deliveries, when another worker wanted to lollygag or go goof off, or even just stop at the bank and cash their check, Wayne was hard-nosed and insisted they not waste company time and promptly return to the warehouse.
Delivering furniture through the different neighborhoods, Wayne learned more and more about all the nooks and crannies of Missoula, Montana, from the professors' homes by the university to the new suburbs sprouting out in the far corners. He'd even make intricate maps of his own of these places.
Meanwhile, there were strange sightings of a masked intruder about. Sometimes people would come home to feel as if someone had been there. Other times they'd wake up in the middle of the night and realize someone was in their house, and then chase the intruder off. Some of them received obscene phone calls. What they didn't realize at the time was that they all had something in common. They'd all received deliveries from Conlon's furniture.
That's super creepy. Chapter 5, Robin from Texas.
In late August of 1984, a teenage runaway was dropped off at Tabor's truck stop in East Missoula after getting in an argument with the trucker she'd hitched a ride with.
Eyeing the town, she noticed a rough-and-tumble cowboy bar called The Cabin and strolled over. Immediately meeting the bouncer at the door, a well-built, red-headed man named Wayne, wearing a Star Wars t-shirt with the sleeves cut off.
Wayne was sweet and friendly, and the two began talking. He could see she was a stranger and new in town with nowhere to go. And he offered to let her stay at his house, which he shared with his father, a long-haul truck driver who was out of town.
She told him her name was Robin. It wasn't. She told him she was from Texas. She wasn't. She told him she was 21. She wasn't.
But the two became a couple and were often seen together. Wayne introducing her to all his friends, bringing her to parties, making the rounds. She always introduced herself as Robin from Texas. The lovebirds even had their photos taken in a photo booth. A series of black and white photos showing them kissing, Wayne bearded and wearing dark glasses, a very 80s sweatband across his forehead.
But the relationship lasted just a month.
When friends asked what happened, Wayne simply told them, "She's gone."
He told some friends that she'd hooked up with a trucker and jumped in his semi. He told other friends he'd taken her to the bus station and bought her a bus ticket. No one noticed the inconsistencies or really thought much about it.
But folks were surprised at how Wayne had brought the girl into his life, as he was notoriously secretive and usually didn't let anyone into his inner domain, the room he had in the house his father had inherited. By now, his brothers and sisters had all moved out. It was just Wayne and his father was often away on long-haul trucking runs.
The few who had ventured into Wayne's bedroom described it as a bizarre place. The only window was covered with thick black plastic, and a huge Conan the Barbarian poster filled the wall. There were little shrines and books on black magic and the occult, as well as Viking history. Knives and swords were everywhere, many of them homemade, hanging on the walls, laid out on tabletops, hidden in drawers, as well as a bat with nails pounded in the end hanging by a medieval mace, brass knuckles, jars and jars of vitamins, his stolen Navy telescope, porn magazines stacked nearly to the ceiling, some still in their plastic sheaths unopened.
And birds' feet. Wayne collected the feet of birds, talons, didactyls, palmates, from the tiny claws of sparrows to the large talons of hawks, all with bits of feather and flesh still attached. But, I don't know, I have to admit, I may have a few chicken and hawk claws laying around myself.
Chicken and hawk claws are one thing. How did he get the feet of all those other birds is my question.
Montana's got, like, everyone hunts, even that beaver skull I gave you, that came from Montana.
Okay, fair enough.
I saw an ad of like buy 50 beaver skulls. I was like, okay.
That's so funny that you did that. Wayne also collected law enforcement badges. And there were maps, all sorts of maps, detailing Missoula, including homemade maps showing the layouts of trailer parks and apartment complexes.
His mattress was protected by a green rubber sheet. Make of that what you will.
I need your company, but only in small doses. I've never been alone, but I finally came the closest. looked like a red ocean. I've seen it all, and the first view of the last stand is a body cast from broken bones, from bouncing off the walls again. Then it hits me, the reason why I'm dizzy is I've been traveling in circles, trying to keep myself busy.
In December, a wildlife photographer venturing in the woods just 3 miles from the house Wayne shared with his father discovered a horrible sight. A human leg protruding up from the frozen earth.
Exposure had turned the leg black, and the ground was frozen so hard as to be impenetrable. Investigators had to put a tent around the leg with heaters inside to thaw the earth out enough to dig.
Eventually, the entire body was recovered. She was nude, buried face up. She'd been shot in the head once and in the temple twice. Like Betty Beavertail, investigators named her for the place they found her, Debbie Deer Creek.
After Wayne's death, investigators would realize that this was the girl who'd called herself Robin from Texas, and hairs in his truck would link Wayne to her.
Normally, hair isn't relied on for identification, but she had bleached and dyed her hair several times, giving the strands a very distinctive coloring pattern.
But it wouldn't be until 2006 that DNA would reveal who she actually was. Marcella Bachman, only 16, a runaway from Vancouver who was previously thought to have been the victim of serial killer Gary Ridgway.
The cuts and the scrapes, the course of the day.
She had lied to everyone about her name, age, and hometown, so she wouldn't be sent back to her abusive home.
Oh man, it's so sad.
Chapter 6. Janet Lee Lucas.
On September 11th, 1985, in the early morning hours, a bear hunter was prowling in a dried-up mountainside creek bed called Crystal Creek when he spotted something strange among the rocks and debris that had been washed down during the spring thaws. A very pale, perfectly round and smooth object. Pulling it free, he realized it was a human skull.
Investigators would then uncover nearly the entire skeleton along the dried creek bed. Not knowing who she was, like Betty Beavertail and Debbie Deer Creek, investigators named her after where they'd found her, Crystal Creek.
She'd been shot in the head twice, both of the .32 caliber bullets still inside her skull.
Being as she was only 3 miles from where the other bodies had been found, it was becoming apparent that there was a serial killer at work, a monster in their community, dumping bodies in the forest, who became known as the Missoula Mauler.
And it wouldn't be until 2021 that DNA would reveal the true identity of Christy Crystal Lake. Her name was Janet Lee Lucas. She was 23 years old and had last been seen in Sandpoint, Idaho in 1983. How or when she got to Montana, what she was doing there, is unknown to this day.
Chapter 7. the Shook family.
In the 1980s, Conlon's Furniture was the most popular furniture store in Missoula, Montana. Everyone bought their furniture there, from the mayor to blue-collar workers to ranchers, farmers, and cowboys, choosing how to decorate their homes from the extensive showroom of kitchen tables, beds, bureaus, wardrobes, mirrors, clocks, sofas, and lazy boys.
In August 1985, a young married couple named Mike and Teresa Shook came to the store to buy living room furniture for their new house.
It was a big investment, $1,600, and they had to get financing and approved credit, but they made it happen.
The Shooks lived 50 miles south of Missoula, in the little town of Hamilton, where Mike was a history teacher at the local high school. They had 3 children, Matt, 7, Luke, 4, and Megan, 2. And they had just moved into their first home together, a home which they'd been building and working on themselves over the past 3 years, living with Teresa's father during the construction.
The Shooks had their furniture delivered and were quite proud of it, showing it off to friends, neighbors, and family. They'd done it, realized the American dream.
On the evening of December 12, 1985, the happy family were home, Teresa making cookies she was going to use to decorate the Christmas tree, Mike lounging on his new sofa beside a roaring fire, when there was a knock on the door.
Little 4-year-old Luke opened the door, not recognizing the red-headed man who had delivered the furniture.
Wayne Nance boldly strolled into the home, shutting the door behind him, waved a pistol, and announced,
"I am Conan the Barbarian."
As Mike leapt to his feet, Wayne told them he was there for money, to give him money and no one would be hurt. And to show them he meant business, he fired a warning shot, just as he'd done with Donna Pounds. But his warning shot accidentally hit Teresa in the leg.
Mike grabbed a candle holder and went to attack the intruder, while Teresa grabbed a tennis racket and began beating him with it. All the while, little Luke and Megan watched, 7-year-old Matt sound asleep in his room.
But Wayne, a former military man, weightlifter, and bouncer, easily overpowered them and stabbed Mike in the chest, killing him.
Wayne Nance then forced Teresa into her bedroom at gunpoint, while her husband lay bleeding out on the floor, and tied her spread eagle to the bed frame with clothesline he brought along with him.
He locked 4-year-old Luke in the bedroom with Matthew, then put Megan in the bassinet beside her mother's bed so she could watch as he cut her clothes off her with his knife and sexually assaulted her.
Wayne then stabbed Teresa Shook in the chest, killing her.
Since he'd used his father's pistol during the attack, he then attempted to dig the bullet out of Teresa's leg, but failed to do so and eventually gave up.
Wayne began to rummage through the house, taking a plaster statue of an elk, as well as a homemade hunting knife and a collection of silver dollars.
He then attempted to set the house on fire by lighting a pile of magazines and throwing some Naugahyde bar stools on the blaze. Then Wayne Nance, calling himself Conan the Barbarian, slipped out into the Montana night and drove north, back to Missoula.
But the fire he started did not set the house on fire. Mike Shook had built his home so securely as to be airtight, and without a flow of oxygen, the fire died and just began to smolder. But the smoke from the smoldering foam and Naugahyde was laced with cyanide, and the deadly fumes filled the house, putting Megan into a coma and knocking Matt and Luke unconscious.
Jeez. In the morning, a neighbor came by for a play date and, noticing something was amiss, entered the house and rescued the children from the cyanide-filled house. Megan nearly died on the way to the hospital, her lungs collapsing.
The poisoned children were then airlifted from Missoula to Colorado, to Denver's Porter Memorial Hospital's burn unit, where they eventually did pull through and recover. But Luke's memory was hazy. His only clear memory, a stranger with a gun shouting, "I am Conan the Barbarian."
Chapter 8. Weird, and disturbing Wayne.
That Christmas, Wayne gave his father a plaster elk sculpture and showed off his new hunting knife. Ugh.
And more customers from Conlin's Furniture were receiving obscene phone calls. One customer changing their number only to have the new number shortly begin receiving the calls again.
Though Wayne acted charming and sweet to women to their faces, he was cold and crude with the other men, saying, quote, "Women are just an appliance. You put them on the bed and you plug them in."
And he was slowly turning the warehouse into his own little world. He filled a huge 4-pane window with the silhouette of a spider. He drew a nearly life-sized portrait of the Elephant Man on a pillar. His own cubicle was covered in glossy magazine pictures of naked women, and he hung up a large Conan the Barbarian poster.
Chris was seriously considering firing him, but he was such a hard worker, and he really did keep the warehouse running smoothly.
Then Wayne reported that there was an overhead crawl space where you could look down through the vent into the women's bathroom stalls, as well as a peephole carved right into the wall.
Wayne claimed someone from the warehouse had made the peephole and was spying on the women employees when they went to the bathroom. But when questioned, all the warehouse workers said that Wayne was the one who had made the peephole and was the only one who had ever used it. They all thought it was both childish and disgusting.
Most likely, Wayne feared he was about to get caught peeping, so he alerted the store himself, hoping to shift blame. But in the end, he was the prime and only suspect.
And while the women who worked at Conlin's Furniture had thought Wayne was just a goofy oddball before, they were beginning to grow very frightened of him. He bought a Kodak Instamatic disc camera and was constantly taking pictures of them, often surprising them, calling out, "Hey, look here!" Flash.
Wayne took roll after roll after roll of pictures. It was annoying to the female workers, but what they didn't know was that he meticulously organized the photos in albums, cropping them, writing notes on the back. Some of the photos he had blown into large 8x10 prints.
And he had an entire catalog dedicated to Chris and Chris alone. Even cutting her signature out of inventory forms to adorn the albums.
He carried a picture of Chris in his wallet and wrote things on the back of the pictures like, quote, "I love you," and, quote, "I want you to live with me."
So weird, he pasted together a reply from her. This is bizarre. Cutting words out from a Lazy Boy ad, including love from Love Seat. He made the phrase, "I love you, big boy," followed by Chris's signature he had cut out. It's so creepy, but it's also perhaps an attempt at a magical spell, type of chaos magic. But if so, it did not work.
Little did Chris know he was stalking her, breaking into her house when she wasn't home, that he'd gone through all her drawers, had been deep inside her closet where he discovered her wedding dress in a zippered garment bag.
He'd actually taken the wedding dress out, cut himself with his knife, and lined the inside of the dress with his blood before carefully putting it back. Again, possibly more attempts at magical spells.
Chris wouldn't discover that her wedding dress had been lined with blood until months after Wayne's death, right there in that very bedroom where the dress hung.
Chapter 9, September 4th, 1986.
And then came that insane night when Doug discovered Wayne snooping in the bushes outside their house, and all hell broke loose.
Montana is often seen as the Wild West, and in true Wild West fashion, the gunsmith took out the bad guy, and in the most dramatic fashion possible. Wayne had finally met his match. The Missoula Mauler was dead.
Wayne Nance died before he could be charged with any of the many murders he was physically attributed to, and the many others he was merely suspected of.
In the end, 6 murders would be attributed to this horrible serial killer who lurked in the Rocky Mountains of Montana, but investigators believe he could very well be responsible for many, many more.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Wayne Nance, the Missoula Mauler. We hope that you've enjoyed it.
And remember, if you start getting obscene phone calls and it feels like you're being stalked, that overly friendly coworker may not be as nice as you think.
Stay safe out there, Murder Coaster listeners, and thank you so much for tuning in.
And you have a story you'd like us to cover, let us know at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening.